because I am risk averse, right? That's the reason why I believe in Bitcoin. I don't believe in it because I want to make a ton of money. I believe in it because I want everybody to level up and hold a form of money that protects their long-term savings and wealth. You can be your own private Swiss bank. You can have your own mobile phone and get access to your private Swiss bank, cryptographically protected. When people ask me the question, should I invest in Bitcoin? Will it go up? Will it go down? I don't care. I don't care. What I care about is that we're collectively working towards something for the benefit of humanity. Is there something in the world that could fix a broken economy, fix society, fix injustice, fix inequality? I think Bitcoin has some answers there. Won't fix everything, but if we fix an economy, we can fix a lot of things as a result. They will realize that this is a hard form of money, and they will start to demand of their employers, please pay me in Bitcoin. I don't want to be paid in pounds anymore. It's depreciating. I'm losing 10%, 20%, maybe one day 30, 40% a year. Versus this hard form of money, which you can send to me electronically within seconds. So send it to me this way. I'm saying that sound money can solve a lot of things. It sounds very ambitious, if you like, but I sincerely believe that.
Harris Irfan, welcome to the In Good Faith podcast.
Thank you for having me, Iqbal.
A real pleasure to have you here, my Bitcoin brother. In fact, I was thinking...
Are we Bitcoin brothers? Because I'm not sure that I've orange pilled you yet properly.
No. Well, okay, I'm sure, I can say my Bitcoin... Is there a Bitcoin Shahada? Is there something I need to say, like, at the end of this show?
There is an orange pill moment. Most people have a moment.
It's funny. Yeah, they have a moment, yeah. So when was your moment?
I was giving one of my usual lectures on Islamic finance. This was 2017. And someone in the audience in the Q&A stood up and said, what do you think of Bitcoin? So my talk had been about, the Islamic banking industry and how Islamic finance works and why it's good. This was 2017, remember? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I don't really know much about Bitcoin. It's like sort of some weird crypto bro magic internet money, right? And he says, well, actually, it's fungible, meaning that one coin is like another coin, a bit like $1 is like another dollar. It's divisible. It's portable. You can move it around. It's instantaneous. It's electronic. It's cryptographically protected, so it's secure. It's finite. It's scarce, which is quite important because it can't be printed at will by a central authority of some kind. So it can't be manipulated. And because it's peer-to-peer, it's sanction-free. So it's resistance money. It's freedom money. I said, that's very interesting. That sounds a bit like gold. He said, yeah, but it's like digital gold. It's better because you can move it across the world, billions within an instant. I said, I need to go away and research. So I can't give you an opinion now because it sounds very interesting, but I need to go away and do my research. And I did. And then, you know how they say in order to become an expert, you need to spend your 1,000 or 10,000 hours or whatever the number is. And I did my hours and I came away thinking, this is really a fascinating concept, and over the years it seems to be becoming more and more practically used and implemented by people. And so I need to look into this more clearly, and I concluded that it's perhaps the most Sharia compliant form of money today. And people think I've blasphemed when I've said that, because they think that that's just a bizarre conclusion, because they're listening to the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, the propaganda of fiat imperialists, if you want to call them that. People like the IMF and the World Bank and central banks and governments who have a vested interest in ensuring the supremacy of, for example, the US dollar and Western financial institutions that lend to the global South, which is a whole subject in itself. So, I concluded that Bitcoin actually has the characteristics of gold, but practically speaking is better. And actually today, we can't really return to a gold standard. And gold has been used for 5,000-6,000 years of human history as a form of money. And every time the world has existed on a gold standard, we've had long periods where commodities, food, goods and services have been affordable. The moment you allow a ruler to manipulate the supply of money, you can take examples throughout history. We can go back to the Roman Empire, Nero clipping a gram from the 8-gram gold coin, which you might say charted a downward spiral in the Roman Empire from that moment onwards, because over time, wages did not keep up with the cost of goods and services, of basic commodities, of basic grains and wheat and so on. And the people revolted. And this is what happens when you enter a period of inflation and hyperinflation. People will gravitate to something that works better for them. So the moment you start to reduce the value of your money by pumping more money into the money supply is the moment you have a problem. Now, we can't use gold today because it's centralized, and that's a big problem. Decentralization is a big plus point for any form of money where it can't be controlled by a government or a central bank or a small group of people like the Fed.
In what way is gold centralized, just to explain?
Well, 8,000 tons of it sits in the US. And when Venezuela asked for their gold back from the Bank of England, the Bank of England said no. They didn't need to give a reason. They just said, it's in our possession now. Sorry, mate, we don't really like your politics, so we're not going to give you your money back. You can say a similar thing about the dollar. In many ways, that is much more centralized, in fact. So when the Taliban came to power in Afghanistan, $7 billion of Afghani money was sitting in US banks. And the US decided, well, I don't think we will give that back to you. Actually, we'll give it to the victims of 9/11, even though the Afghani people have nothing to do with 9/11. That's theft. And the more you centralize a form of money, the more you can steal if you are the possessor of that money. And gold is possessed by very few places in the world. It's held in custody on behalf of other people. So although in theory gold is wonderful, it's scarce, it's finite, it's divisible, it's fungible, it's somewhat portable. It needs to be secured, but it can be secured. All of these things are good. They point to what we call sound money or hard money. But the reality is, if you try and use it, you've got to withdraw it from somewhere. You can't hold it yourself. You can't be your own Swiss private bank, as you can be with Bitcoin. Now, I'm very careful that I differentiate between Bitcoin and other forms of cryptocurrency, which 99% of which I consider to be a scam or a scheme to enrich the development team. But Bitcoin is not fiat. Bitcoin stands alone by itself. It is a form of money as far as I'm concerned, and it meets the requirements for money in Islam, and it is more useful than gold is today, in my opinion.
Is not the case that even though Bitcoin is in principle decentralized, it is, however, highly concentrated at the moment? I can't remember the exact figures, but I think like the top 1% of...
Is it highly concentrated? Is it any more highly concentrated than the US dollar or gold itself? Because governments around the world will have gold reserves. Governments around the world will have US dollar reserves. You know, the richest, whatever, less than 1%, 0.1% of America owns a huge amount of the land and assets of America and the world. We can make an argument for any one of those forms of money. And this idea that only a few so-called whales hold the largest number of Bitcoin, I think, is one that doesn't stand up to scrutiny when you look at the numbers, when you compare it to the US dollar, for example. And in fact, you can say, well, actually, there's 100 million wallets of Bitcoin in existence today, and that number is massively increasing over time. You can also say that there are a small number of parties who hold Bitcoin in nominee accounts on behalf of millions, if not tens of millions of people. You know, exchanges like Coinbase, for example, or now BlackRock, who have an ETF, which is an exchange-traded fund which holds physical Bitcoin, I think with Coinbase, if I'm not mistaken. So, you know, you could say, oh, that BlackRock holds all the Bitcoin, or Coinbase holds all the Bitcoin, but actually it's held on behalf of many, many people, which, by the way, I don't think is a great thing. I think that if people wake up and see what the potential of Bitcoin really is as peer-to-peer money, then they wouldn't hold it via a custodian like BlackRock or Coinbase. They would hold it themselves, called self-custody, and it's very easy to do. But that's a learning process, and hopefully we, the people, will start to learn that over time, and we'll start to adopt it and start to use it, and it'll lead to a process of spontaneous de-dollarization as people begin to realize that the dollar is inflating away their wealth, their value, their assets.
People are familiar with the idea of the separation of church and state. Bitcoiners and proponents like yourself talk about the importance and the critical importance of the separation of money from state. You touched on it briefly, but just wondering if you can really hone in on this question. Why is it so essential for money and state to be separated?
I don't believe in the inherent goodness of rulers. They're just human beings at the end of the day.
You're so skeptical, Harris.
Well, I don't feel that we should give that responsibility to a human being. And gold, for example, even in the Islamic Golden Age, the mint was approved by a ruler. So the ruler would say, these coins that are minted in this official government mint are acceptable coins. But that doesn't allow them to manipulate the money supply. They're not printing more gold. They're simply verifying that that gold is acceptable to be used by the people, and that's fine. Bitcoin today is a type of money which is verified by tens of thousands of what's called nodes around the world, so it's decentralized. And that verification is mathematically done. And because the maths, it's just pure maths, you can verify that every transaction is a real transaction. So you don't need a central authority to say this is a valid transaction. And every time you allow a central authority, history has shown this, every time you have a single ruler or a government or a central bank who says this may be used as money, this may not be used as money, you're taking away the power of the people to determine that for themselves. If the people want to use gold as money, they'll be arrested. The IMF's own charter says, when we lend to you, you can't repay us in gold. They're telling you, you can't use a sound form of money, a hard form of money, to repay the loan, which is why the developing world and the global south is in hock, in debt peonage, in economic slavery to Western and US financial institutions and the IMF and the World Bank. When the IMF tells you you can't use a form of money that's sanctified in our faith, personally, I think they're acting as an agent of Shaitan. They're actually encouraging the world, half the world, maybe more than half the world, to be in economic slavery, which they'll never recover from.
Even those who are very clear about the harms of the fiat system still have reservations about Bitcoin as the basis for a future economy. Notably, Tariq al-Diwani, who's someone we both have a lot of love and respect for, and whose the conversation I had with him will be now published when this goes out. And in his most recent edition, his fourth edition of his famous Problem with Interest book, he does address the Bitcoin question in some detail, but he concludes that essentially, well, he certainly states his preference, let's say, for a form of sound money that is not based on Bitcoin, but based on some sort of basket of finite assets, a mix of gold and electricity and other things. What do you think he's got wrong?
I don't think he's wrong, actually.
Okay.
As you know, Tariq is a mentor and a friend, and I respect him very deeply. And I've tried for many years to orange pill him. I would say a varying degree of success. So we've now got to the stage where he's accepted that Bitcoin is a thing, and it may be used practically, and it has some uses, and it has some benefits. And he has some reservations, which is great. At least I know that he's open-minded. He must be an open-minded person. If he came as being as ex-derivatives trader at Prebon Yamane and tried to implement Islamic finance, realized that it was very problematic as an industry, and tried to create his own form of sound money through gold coinage. So he's clearly an open-minded individual, and he's an intelligent individual. He understands that here's a concept, and let me at least examine it before I believe the FUD, the propaganda, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that's put out there by people like the IMF. And he's done that. So I'm glad that he's done that. I think his view on it is very nuanced. I encourage people to read it. It's a good analysis. I still feel that he might end up a little bit further from the point that he is at now. I think he might end up possibly accepting that Bitcoin could genuinely be a form of peer-to-peer sound money. I think today he still has his reservations because he's a gold bug, as am I, by the way. I've always been a gold bug. I believe it to be a sound form of money. I just think practically today, the ability to implement it as a form of usable money is quite limited. And we have real-world examples like Venezuela asking the Bank of England for their money back. which they wouldn't give them. Now, the moment that happens, you know that this is not freedom money. Money needs to be free. Money needs to be separated from state. Money cannot have influence of a small group of people or one person saying, yeah, you can have your money if I feel like it.
But Tariq would agree with you on that.
Oh, you would agree with me on that.
So what are his reservations about Bitcoin as you understand them? And then what's your sort of counterpoints to those reservations?
Yeah, well, I think his main reservation is it's not real. It's not a real thing. It's not commodity based. It's not corporeal. I can't see, touch and feel it. And I don't necessarily think that's a valid argument. I think let me put it this way. It can be an argument, but I think it has holes in that argument. And if you and I decide that if we're in a prisoner of war camp in World War II, if cigarettes are the form of money and we use that as a medium of exchange so we can trade other goods and services, then so be it. That's urf, that's custom. That's what we've decided amongst ourselves as social custom. Similarly, seashells on an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean or beads. We can decide amongst ourselves what is a form of money. There was a time, during the time of the Sahaba, they debated whether to use camel skins as a form of money.
But these things are all physical, like you said, right?
These are all physical. We could decide that there were pieces of paper with IOUs written on them. And is that physical? Because you can store the data of that paper in the form of electronic digits in a computer. Now, is that physical? Some might argue it's not. It's not commodity-based. It's not tangible. Therefore, it's not real. I disagree. All the money that circulates, not all, almost all the money that circulates in the world today is digital in nature. We have this conception in the public's mind that somehow, cash is real, but crypto is not real, without realizing that when you go to your bank to withdraw money, that money doesn't really exist. It's in the form of digits. It exists in a corporeal sense. It's in the form of digits, electronic ones and zeros sitting in a computer somewhere. When a bank lends money, and I know Tariq will have spoken about this in great detail about fractional reserve banking, of course. When they lend money, they're actually creating money from nothing. There's this idea amongst people that when they deposit their money in the bank then uses that deposit to lend to somebody else. Doesn't do anything of the sort. Nothing of the sort. Even the Bank of England itself will admit this in one of their quarterly bulletins. If you look them up from 2014, look up a Bank of England quarterly bulletin, and it admits that when a bank lends money, it creates new money from nothing. Now, the definition of riba is excess or surplus, right? So we think of it as interest on a loan. In other words, a little bit of money on top of the original principal. But if you think about it, a lot of money on top of nothing, created out of nothing, is an even worse form of riba. And that's how fiat money exists in the world today. It is 97% of it is created through private sector loans. So when you go to your bank, you're not withdrawing your money at all. It just didn't exist in the first place, right? So this idea that our money is real, there's something there, there's nothing at all there. It's all electronically created. It's even worse than Bitcoin because Bitcoin has at least the backing of energy. Energy was required to create it. That's called proof of work. Proof of work is required to extract gold from the ground with picks and shovels and diggers, right? It costs money, it costs energy to extract gold from the ground. It's good for money to have a need for energy to extract it. It then requires work. It can't be created from nothing, which the US dollar is. And when you have a type of money which is created from nothing because it can be printed by a central bank or printed by banks, private sector banks, who are, as Tariq says, committing a type of fraud, it is a fraud on all people. Surely that's the most extreme form of riba possible. So Bitcoin is something that is extracted through what some people will think is a fairly arbitrary form of mining. It's just solving a computer puzzle. How can that possibly be real? But if we decide amongst ourselves that we will use a medium of exchange, which itself is not the valuable thing, but which assigns value to other things. This is in the way that Imam al-Ghazali said that money should be a medium of exchange. It should be exchanged between hands as a fair value of goods and services, so that hands may be employed in gainful work, building real things, creating real value and jobs, right? This is classical interpretation of money. Bitcoin is a classical interpretation of money. It's going back to its roots as a medium of exchange, We're using it to buy goods and services. People talk about this idea, but it has no intrinsic value. It's not real. Well, if you're in a desert dying of thirst and somebody presents you with a bag full of diamonds, those diamonds are worthless to you. They have zero intrinsic value. If you're presented with a bottle of water, that bottle of water is worth your life. It's worth everything, right? So there's no such thing as intrinsic value.
It's all relative.
It's all relative, yeah.
I think one of the reasons why perhaps people get confused on this point is that up until now in the popular culture, let's say, Bitcoin is seen as a speculative asset, and its value is only considered in terms of pounds and dollars, as opposed to just the medium of exchange, obviously, that we're looking to move towards. So could you just help people to understand the separation between these two? And is it the case that eventually, I mean, in sort of the utopian version of maybe the vision here, that actually we're not looking at Bitcoin in terms of its fiat value, essentially, but we're just looking at it in terms of what it actually acquires for you in real terms within the real economy?
So I come back to this concept of spontaneous de-dollarization. As a currency inflates, or even hyperinflates, and we're not maybe at that stage with the dollar yet, but it's certainly inflating more than we think that it is, according to the government stats. When that happens, the people naturally gravitate towards something they consider to be a sounder form of money that might be deflationary in nature. In the past, that would have been gold, and then Nixon removed the gold peg from the dollar in 1971, so we couldn't use gold after that. And today, that might be Bitcoin, and people start to gravitate towards something that they see as holding value. We are, whatever it is, 16 years or so into an experiment with Bitcoin. And yeah, you could argue Bitcoin's an experiment. I'm an optimist because my faith requires me to be an optimist. And I like to believe in something real, something that's good for humanity. When people ask me the question, should I invest in Bitcoin? Will it go up? Will it go down? I don't care. I don't care. What I care about is that we're collectively working towards something for the benefit of humanity. Is there something in the world that could fix a broken economy, fix society, fix injustice, fix inequality? I think Bitcoin has some answers there. Won't fix everything, but if we fix an economy, we can fix a lot of things as a result. And I think this idea that Bitcoin's volatile, it's moving up and down every day, well, it's young. It's like a startup, if you like. A startup is volatile by nature. If you plotted a graph of Bitcoin's volatility since 2009 and compared it to a graph of gold's volatility since 1971, when Nixon removed the gold peg from the US dollar, you can actually see a very clear parallel that over time, initially there's very wild swings in the price of Bitcoin versus the US dollar. Then over time, that swing starts to narrow and narrow and narrow, but still going up. The overall trend is up. If you look at any 3-year timeline of Bitcoin, it's always up. Any 3-year timeline, right? So people say, what will it be like next month? What will it be like next year? I don't care. I don't care. I care about the long term. I care about sustainability. I care about what my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren will inherit. Will it be a world they can still live in? Will it be a toxified, unsustainable environment? Will we have massive inequality, or will we have equality? Will we have an environment where everybody has an opportunity to be educated and to have a decent job and have a roof over their heads? I'm worried that the dollar has sent us in the opposite direction. It has done. There's a very clear decline. And we can argue that Bitcoin is volatile on a day-to-day basis, but stop looking at it on a day-to-day basis. Look at it over the last 16 years. It's the single most successful investment class for the last 16 years. By a long, long way, nothing else comes close to it. Stop worrying about its daily volatility. Sure, it's a little bit difficult to use as peer-to-peer money right now, or to buy your coffee or buy a pizza or whatever. Yeah, I mean, its value is fluctuating against the currency that you're paid in today. But what we will find over time is as the dollar inflates and possibly hyperinflates, because we are on that downward spiral right now, then people will naturally gravitate towards a hard form of money. And they will ask to be paid in a hard form of money instead of a fiat form of money. And more people will do this as they see hyperinflation taking hold. And already in many countries in the world, in the global south particularly, you have people who say, no, pay me in Bitcoin because I don't want to be paid in Pakistani rupee or Nigerian naira or the Lebanese pound or whatever currency is massively deflating today versus other currencies. One day we may see people saying, no, don't pay me in dollars or pounds or yen or euro. Pay me in Bitcoin because it's much more stable. If they could be paid in gold, and coming back to Tariq's argument, if they could be paid in gold, they'd want to do that. But they can't be today because you'll be arrested if you use gold as a form of money, which I think is the ultimate indicator of where governments stand on whether they should be allowed to dictate to us, the people, what we should use as money.
You've started to enter into the territory of, what the transition might look like from where we are now to a Bitcoin-based world. And I do want to go there and just explore that further with you. Is there anything else, before we go there, is there anything else you would like to say about the relative benefits of, or the promise of a Bitcoin-based economy, society, vis-a-vis the one in which we're in right now?
I think let's look at this from a philosophical point of view. So as Muslims, we have what I would call low time preference. We should be the ultimate low time preference people, deferred gratification, saving and investing for the future, investing in our akhirah, not this dunya, not this world. And, we train ourselves during Ramadan. We fast for 30 days. We train our nafs. We try and improve our character during that month. We're people who value sabr, patience. It's a highly valued concept in our faith. And if we want to follow the prophetic example, we look at that sabr as being a key attribute of the Prophet ﷺ, something that we should try and inculcate within ourselves. What if there was an economic system that encouraged us to save and invest for the future rather than consume today? If all we do is borrow, spend, consume, borrow, spend, consume, then we are desertifying and toxifying our planet. And if we want to stop this trend, we need a form of money that encourages us to save and invest for the future and make better investment decisions. At the moment, the way capitalism works today, modern capitalism is not capitalism at all. It's a corporatocracy. And typically a venture capitalist, these are financial firms who invest in early stage companies, are effectively throwing 20 darts at a dartboard and hoping one of them sticks. 1 in 20. That's it. They can throw money at 19 bad projects. They barely do any analysis on them. They throw $30 million at a venture with a PowerPoint presentation behind it and no revenues and no product. That's how venture capitalism really works today. And they will try and justify it and say, oh no, we've got DCF cash flow models and we do very complex analysis and we're nothing of the sort at all, believe me. I've been in that industry for 30 years. So we have this situation where we're throwing good money after bad projects. And what if there was a form of money that encouraged us to just throw one dart at a dartboard and make a score, maybe even a bullseye each time, right? That's a form of money that I want to get to. And that would align with our philosophy as Muslims, which is to have low time preference and save and invest for the future and defer gratification and worry about future generations and worry about the planet and have stewardship of the planet. These are concepts that are very dear to our faith. So that's why I like the idea of a sound money. We had sound money for 700 years during the so-called Islamic Golden Age, when we had the Islamic dinar, the gold standard. It would be wonderful to return to that, where mankind has time and space for higher pursuits, for developing the astrolabe and algebra and medicine, medical techniques, and architecture that stands to this day. That's the result of a sound money standard, of a gold standard. If we can return to that, we actually reset the social incentives for people to behave in a better way, for a better society, for harmony between nations, for fluidity of trade between nations, which leads to peace, right? I'm saying that sound money can solve a lot of things. It sounds very ambitious, if you like. But I sincerely believe that, because that's who we are as Muslims. We're supposed to be optimistic people, So when people talk to me about, I want to invest in this crypto and will it go up, will it go down? I don't care. That's not what I'm interested in.
Sure. Part of what you said there in terms of your dartboard analogy and your critique of, say, current venture capital practice, it seems to suggest a level of risk aversion that might be anti-innovation in a way. That actually, if you're only going to go for businesses which are, sort of so guaranteed, actually a lot of the innovation that people do require, and even the kind of things that you refer to, medical innovations and other such things, are high-risk ventures. They may be very early stage. They might not be that proof of revenue and income and everything else, but there might be some sound people who have experience and have a good idea. Presumably, you're not saying that such things would be sidelined.
Not at all. No, I come from the private sector, and my ability to put bread on the table is a function of my ability to create new products that people want. So obviously, I'm not somebody who is anti-innovation. That's part of what I do for a living. I think that we have gone so far in the wrong direction in the modern corporatocracy, and I use that word very carefully. We don't live in a time of true capitalism. We live in a time where the top 0.something% have control of business. Look at Musk being paid $1 trillion by his shareholders. $1 trillion? That's just his dividend. That doesn't make any sense on any level. That's the world that we've entered into, where very few individuals control everything. And a world in which we are encouraged to innovate, where we have a financial system and a monetary system that encourages us to innovate, is a good world. We don't have to throw 20 darts at a dartboard to find good projects. It could be 5, it could be 4. But today that ratio is way too skewed.
Sure. Okay. All right. So let's talk more about the actual transition now, because this is the part where I feel, and maybe it's just for want of having explored it sufficiently myself, but I just feel that the vision of this Bitcoin-based economy, you've articulated, in summary form very clearly. It has been well articulated out there, generally speaking. People see the harms of the current system. But I feel that what isn't so clear, even to me right now, is precisely how we go from, and I know it's not a linear pathway, but it would be interesting to understand and to speculate, both from a kind of a macro perspective, but as well as from a kind of call to action perspective. What does an individual viewer or listener who starts to familiarize themselves with all of this, start to buy into it, start to become a believer?
Yeah.
What do they do essentially, and what are we talking about here in terms of likely? And I know we're in sort of the future, prediction sort of realm here, but what are you talking about in terms of likely and important milestones on this pathway to a better, to a Bitcoin-based economy?
Yeah.
And what can individuals do to accelerate that process? So
I think one of the biggest problems we have today is education. And we're still throwing this FUD around. We're still telling people that, it's terrorism financing, isn't it? It's used for money laundering. It's very volatile. It's bad for the environment. It's not guaranteed by a government, as if any of these things are possible with fiat. They have this conception that governments somehow stand behind everything. But they don't. The word credit comes from the Latin credere, meaning to have faith in something. You use the pound and the dollar because you believe that it works. It's not because the Bank of England or the Fed stands behind it. They're not obliged to give you anything. In fact, the Bank of England itself admits that a shopkeeper is not obliged to accept your £10 note as a legal form of money. There's nothing that the government can do to enforce that. It's just because the people have faith in it. So we have to get away from this idea that fiat money is somehow guaranteed by a government. And there's lots of propaganda floating around that has led people to believe that fiat is good and they somehow are protected. And yet they don't measure on a daily, monthly, or annual basis when they submit their tax returns. They don't actually measure how much their wealth is depreciated as a result of their currency depreciating. That doesn't go on your tax return. But actually the government has effectively taxed you, possibly 10% a year, as a result of depreciation of the money that they themselves printed.
Mm-hmm. So inflation is a effective
inflation
tax.
is a tax. It's a form of theft.
Sure. But let's go. Let's go beyond education.
So education it has to be education.
I understand
that's why I emphasize that point.
Absolutely,
because people are not educated
right
right now. And they're asking the wrong questions. Hence why they keep asking, is it going to go up? Is it going to go down? No. What do we want to achieve? What kind of What society do we want to achieve?
Sure.
And understand that sound money, whether it's Bitcoin or whether it's something else, sound money is a means to achieving a society that fixes a lot of injustices, right? So that's the first step. And then the next step is, well, how do I get into it? What do I do next? And the simplest answer is buy and hold it. Convert some of your savings if you can. If you have savings, convert it into Bitcoin. If you can, hold it in self-custody. What does that mean? That means don't leave your coins on an exchange. Just like a bank, it doesn't belong to you. Another common complaint and common criticism, part of the propaganda, is it's not safe. It can be stolen from you. An exchange can be hacked. Well, don't leave it on an exchange then. You can be your own private Swiss bank. You can have your own mobile phone and get access to your private Swiss bank, cryptographically protected, with a form of cryptography that hasn't been cracked yet. And there's an argument that, one day with quantum computing, they might be able to crack that code, but there's a counter argument as well, which we don't need to get into because it's way beyond my pay grade. And I think that once people understand that the first step after they've educated themselves is to buy and hold and watch it and see what happens and watch the process of de-dollarization unfold, they will realize that this is a hard form of money, and they will start to demand of their employers, please pay me in Bitcoin. I don't want to be paid in pounds anymore. It's depreciating. I'm losing 10%, 20%, maybe one day 30, 40% a year versus this hard form of money, which you can send to me electronically within seconds. So send it to me this way. And once more and more people start saying that, the tech just becomes easier. Right now, my mother wouldn't know what to do with Bitcoin. She doesn't know how to use it, but she uses the internet. She uses WhatsApp. She watches videos without even knowing the technology that goes behind it. She just boop on an iPad and she's watching some GOTV newscast without even knowing she doesn't have a computer science degree to know how that works. We will get there with Bitcoin. We'll have on-ramps and off-ramps from fiat where people will just naturally do things on their mobile phone and not even realize there's a bunch of technology and plumbing behind it. So for the time being, I don't think it's that hard personally to self-custody. Yeah, sure, there's a little bit of education to go through. You have to know the nuts and bolts of what wallets are and what addresses are and how not to give away your private keys and so on and so on. And that's all, practical stuff that you need to learn. But eventually we'll get to a stage where my mother can use it as well to buy goods and services and to earn her pension in, right? And that's the next step. And then the step after that is to use it as peer-to-peer money. Mm-hmm. By that stage, once you have the electronics, the secondary layer on top of the primary layer, which is Bitcoin on the blockchain, the secondary layer is things like Lightning Network, where you have instantaneous transfer of money between people. Boop, I just touched my mobile phone to yours and now I've transferred you 0.01 Bitcoin or whatever it is to buy some goods or services. We'll get there very soon, I think. That plumbing is being built right now. That infrastructure is being built right now. It's a bit like the people manufacturing shovels and diggers for the gold, the gold run.
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is that people can expect that companies will start to accept Bitcoin for people to pay for the goods and services?
To some degree, they already are. It's not happening in a big way at the moment.
Where is that happening?
Well, I know freelancers, for example, who will accept Bitcoin as payment for their services.
And charities do. When I was running National Zakat Foundation, we actually started to receive Bitcoin then.
That's how I donate to National Zakat Foundation, by the way. And I made it very clear to them. From going forward, I'm not going to donate to you in fiat. Mm-hmm. It's going to be in Bitcoin. Yeah. So that's happening already. And
just with that, the interesting next step there is, and I was having this conversation with Ismail of Evergive, because obviously he's looking at the whole kind of end-to-end charity kind of sort of infrastructure and steps. The problem, obviously, at the moment in giving the Bitcoin to any particular charity is that whilst it works in that first transaction, obviously at the moment, what charities are generally doing is then just converting that Bitcoin back to fiat to go and do whatever they're doing.
Yes.
So the trick would be, well, in the case of National Zakat Foundation, for example, that when their own recipients are also happy to receive in Bitcoin, and then when they can go and pay in Bitcoin, and so you got the full circular kind of economy.
And I've made this point to NZF. I've said, actually, I think that you're better served and you'll serve your donees, if that's a word.
Recipients,
Your recipients better if you hold your Bitcoin rather than converting it immediately to fiat. And by the way, they get gouged. They get gouged by the platforms they use. And I pointed it out to them and told them exactly how much they're losing in the conversion. Yeah,
sure.
They are being ripped off by their service providers.
Yeah.
And I hope they wake up to that, because it's losing them a lot of money, let alone the fact that the moment they convert it, they're actually losing value, because they now put it into a softer currency, which is now depreciating versus what they would have. I tell other people that, if you want to pay off your student loan, if you want to put down a deposit on a house, save in a hard currency. Pay off your student loan in a hard currency, right? But they're not doing that because they're worried about day-to-day volatility. They're not thinking long-term. So the first thing is, I'd prefer that they hold it when they receive the money in Bitcoin. And that will then in future encourage the circular economy, where we hold this money in Bitcoin and therefore we'd like to spend it in Bitcoin as well. So once the recipients start accepting Bitcoin again, once the technology is there and the plumbing has been implemented, it'll be a much easier process. I hope we get there, because I genuinely believe Bitcoin is resistance money. I must come back to this idea that I'm not saying I'm not a crypto bro. I'm a very conservative guy. I believe in Bitcoin because I'm conservative.
You certainly don't sound like one, sir.
No, because I am risk averse. Right? That's the reason why I believe in Bitcoin. I don't believe in it because I want to make a ton of money. I believe in it because I want everybody to level up and hold a form of money that protects their long-term savings and wealth. And that is a risk-averse reason to believe in it.
Just a particular question on the self-custody. One thing that occurred to me was the issue of inheritance. Someone has all the self-custody stuff. He's all set up. They pass away.
Yes.
That's part of their estate. Is there the technology or the facility right now for that to be passed on? How does that work?
So first of all, I have protocols in place, which I've explained to my family what to do in the event of my death. And that's because I self-custody. But I also believe in something called multi-institutional custody, MIC, which is where Bitcoin has an inherent ability to have multiple signatories.
Right.
So you could have 3 key holders, let's call them. And 2 out of the 3 key holders need to turn the key in the lock, like the nuclear codes, if you like, in order for a transaction.
Probably not the best analogy to use. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that's a risky endeavor. And you need to have protocols in place to protect yourself against mistakes being made or people stealing the codes, right? So how do you do that? You have MIC, multi-institutional custody, where you have 2 institutions independent of each other and yourself, and you all 3 hold a key each. And 2 of you must be present in order to turn the lock and make a transaction or a withdrawal or pay somebody, which is a good way of protecting it. And you can specify with those institutions, these are my beneficiaries in the event of my death. So there are already protocols and institutions in place that allow you to do this.
Right, okay, yeah. So I'm just thinking, so for somebody who's already got, for example, a will, and it's all set up in the context of in terms of divisions, according to, say, Quranic kind of divisions, etc. And then now they acquire some Bitcoin through self-custody. Presumably they could then update that for the executors / to essentially just have those keys and just to do what needs to be done to pass things on from here to here.
There are many ways that you could do that. Okay. I mean, the simplest way would be to bury something in your back garden or whatever with the codes. I don't recommend that, by the way, because then everybody will be digging up people's back gardens.
Yeah, sure.
But there are secure ways that you can store your private keys, which is a seed phrase of 24 words randomly selected, which makes it very, 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 very difficult to crack. No computer today can crack that.
Yeah, sure.
So, as long as you have a method in place to ensure that these keys get passed on to your heirs.
Yeah. So just back to the transition. So just to summarize what I've kind of got from what we've said so far is that you've got this sort of natural underlying process whereby it's a little bit like, it reminds me of this kind of, this thought I remember having when new atheism was on the rise. And I thought to myself, actually, in some ways, there's not a lot for us to do here because it will just fall on its own sword because it's so and essentially that's essentially what kind of happened. I don't think that people moved away from all of that because of all of philosophical arguments for God or whatever. It's just because it just doesn't work. And so what you said reminded me of that in a way that there's this underlying process ongoing that is inevitable where the harms and the the loss of value in the existing kind of fiat sort of system.
Yeah.
Well, that's just taking place
Fall
anyway.
away.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got that going on. You have the developments that you've talked about, the plumbing, which allows for more transactions to take place. And then I think the critical part here, which maybe is a part where I don't know, but I don't feel I'm seeing almost in sort of digital space, but not so much in the kind of at the level of the nation state, let's say, or in the context of citizenship. Are we seeing these sort of campaigns for this? And you mentioned this thing about employees basically starting to demand that actually they be paid in this. And I just wonder whether there needs to be something done there to actually initiate this more grassroots campaigns to which then come into the public realm to just say, well, this is what we want now, in various sectors. It could be private sector, public sector, where people just start to demand that we want to be paid in this manner. That is not something we're seeing, right? But I think that's the kind of thing we need to see now.
Oddly, you will see more people actually, it's unsurprising that you will see more people in the global south and in poor nations who are demanding to be paid.
Yeah, so this is happening there. Yeah.
But here in the UK and the US and in Western Europe, people are relatively comfortable. We're seeing the cracks opening up. We can see that there is something wrong with the economy. We're seeing that something is not working right now. But relatively, most people have a roof over their heads. They have food on the table.
Yeah, you're not experiencing enough pain to demand the change.
You're not experiencing enough pain. And that comfort level has led to no motivation really to change the status quo. But I think if you care about the world and the direction that we're going in and the polarization and authoritarianism and the rise of fascism, you should care about Bitcoin as resistance money, as freedom money, because it genuinely allows you to defy authoritarianism and fascism.
But in the end, I think it will be, unfortunately, but understandably to a certain degree, it will be a selfish motive in the end that will drive people drive that change.
If the selfish motive is preservation of the human race, then that's a perfectly good selfish reason.
No, but I mean that's almost like a collective selfishness, right?
Yeah.
Or I mean like an almost personal self-interest. Like most people, at the end of the day, most people are motivated by that.
Yes.
I think you're right. I think that.
But here's the great thing: your personal self-interest coincides with societal best interest.
Sure.
That's the great thing about this.
No, absolutely.
Right?
But I think in a way there needs to be an appeal to let's put it this way. I think in a sense, maybe there's a synergy or an overlap between the very people who are being sort of, excited into, say, anti-immigration kind of sentiment, who are suffering, at the bottom end of the scale, and then rather than the wool is being pulled over their eyes by saying blame these people or blame those people.
Yeah.
Actually, those are the very people that we should be addressing.
Correct.
But with this as a solution.
Absolutely right. I totally agree with that. And this is a prophetic example.
And that campaign, I think, is not
correct
existing right
This
now.
is a prophetic example of speaking to people in a manner they understand, in a contextual way,
and with genuine concern for them.
We're not doing that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm here, and I know that you have your reservations about the word Islamic finance, but it's totally failed as an industry. Totally. It hasn't addressed the core problem, which is that economics doesn't work.
In that we can agree.
Yeah, it doesn't work. Yeah. And the version of Islamic finance that we presented was in the form of banking, which was basically a reverse engineering, a replication of conventional finance. That wasn't the point of it. The point of it was to seek justice and equality in society. The very people who are worried about immigration and migrants in this country and changing the culture and bringing in crime and all the rest of it, we should be addressing them by saying your problems are economic ones. You can't access the NHS; it's broken. You have to pay too much for goods and services. Your wages have stayed stagnant. You can't afford to make the rent. You can't afford to buy houses anymore. They've inflated out of your reach. You can't get loans for anything to buy anything. You don't have jobs. Your factory's shut down. The economy collapsed. Of course you're angry. You're reaching out to whatever the media tells you to reach out. 35,000 people a year coming on a small boat. That's nothing. There's 4 million people in poverty. We're not addressing that point. That's the real problem. So here we are talking about this tiny number of people who, honestly, they're not all criminals. They're escaping war. They're trying to survive. That's why they're here. And here we are blaming them for all of our problems because the media keeps feeding us this lie. It's a blatant lie. It's not supported by the facts on the ground. And here we are with an opportunity to tell them What if I could offer you, this is the Morpheus moment, this is the orange pill moment. What if I could offer you this pill that wakes you up to why we got these problems in society? It's because a tiny proportion of people in this country control what you think, control what you hear, and control your money supply. If you can fix that money supply, you've taken that power away from them. You can control that narrative. So start looking at alternatives to the type of money that we allow our rulers to tell us we can and cannot use. Fight back against the banks. Tell the banks, I don't want this anymore. You know.
Have you, given what, if it is true that actually sufficient, or there is insufficient educational campaigning on this issue in the global north, and given that you are such an articulate gentleman in this regard, and you really believe it, and you understand it, you have all the experience.
I don't. That's the thing. I don't fully understand. I've still got a lot to learn on
Sure,
this.
but in relative, as you said, it's all relative, as we said, right? So you're certainly steps ahead. But isn't there something to be said for, just on this is a very personal note, and we'll come on to obviously what your current work is, right? And you're providing, I suppose, in the context of the current system, particular products that you think are much more ethical, much more sound, and all of that. And we'll come on to that. But isn't there something to be said, maybe from a more collective standpoint, that actually what we should be doing as a community is endowing and backing Harris and others ad infinitum, so that what you're actually spending all of your time doing is out there, rallying the people, if you want to say, educating the people, rallying the people, or helping to organize directly, indirectly, the actual, just generating the sentiment on a grassroots level, on a mass basis, not to any particular faith community, but just to people across the board, to really get on board with this. Because I think, as I've been trying to say, I think that's the bit that's missing, and I think that a lot of the good people who believe in it, obviously for completely obviously understandable and even noble reasons, they're doing whatever they're doing, but in a way, still, in a sense, like if I may be so bold, like the critique of what you're doing at the moment, like in terms of what you spend most of your time doing, right, is that it's still linked to the underlying. It still assumes the kind of the fiat basis for what we have around, and that's understandable because obviously we need to function.
Yes.
But in a way, lesser people could do that stuff, right? And maybe you just need to, start the, well, I won't go as far as to say yet the political party, but start the actual campaign group proper that's going to really set this on, set this on fire,
so
if you like.
I think two things need to happen. I think on the one hand, we need to reset what finance is and what financial institutions do. Yes. And that's in the normie, fiat space, right? And on the other hand, we need to advocate for and educate people about what sound money is and why today's form of money is not sound. Absolutely. And why it's affecting us badly and why we're ending up blaming the wrong people for the problems in society. And if we wake up to why our society is unjust, because we've allowed the top 0.something% to rule us and dictate what we think and feel and hear, if we address that, then that's fixing the monetary system. But we've also got to fix the financial system. So actually, I'm going to push back a little bit on what you said there. Okay. I think it's actually essential for, I mean, you've had a podcast with Ibrahim Khan of IFG. He's very active on the ground with the retail investor, which is a type of investor that I don't face. And his work is very necessary to get people to buy into the idea of leveling up, right? And I massively support him on this. I feel a lot of love for the guy, but I feel he hasn't. I feel not enough of his narrative is on this topic, though. He's definitely facilitated conversations, but I feel like his own. It's like simultaneous again to doing the best that we can in the current situation. Yeah, it's almost like the advocacy for the new situation. But somebody has to do that.
No,
we have to do that, because if we don't work with the establishment, then we'll always be outside cranks, and we will never get we have to find a balance. How do we do this practically? And we do that by changing some of the status quo and also, and in parallel, suggesting a potentially much more radical solution. And I'm a little bit nervous about suggesting the radical solution, because when I do that, people will naturally, many of them will think I'm just mental and just a crackhead. And I'm if you do these radical things and you're going to destroy the world economy, you're going to destroy finance. And Muslims will say this to me. They'll say, oh, but the system's working. Well, of course it's working for you. You've got a nice house and a nice car.
Harris, all the greats were considered crackheads at the beginning.
Well, I mean, yes, you can argue.
Badge of honor, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's the famous Steve Jobs, here's to the crazy ones. Right? Here's a famous Steve Jobs quote, and I sincerely believe that in order to move the needle, we have to be seen as a little bit crazy. By
and
others.
even the Prophet, peace be upon him, was accused of.
I mean, he was a rebel. He was a contrarian.
100%.
He brought an entirely new system to the world at a time of Jahiliyyah, and in a sense, you can say that what this thing, Bitcoin or sound money, is saying is a complete U-turn to what unsound money does. Unsound money is here to support debt peonage, economic slavery of the global south, of people within our own society here in the so-called civilized, cultured West, where we have freedom and freedom of speech and free markets, so-called free markets. We don't have free markets at all. These are highly manipulated, centralized markets. So this idea that we're living in a free society is, again, it's about the Morpheus moment. It's about the orange pill saying, wake up, people. This is not actually what's happening. Look at what's underlying what's happening.
Yeah.
Your money is not free. And here's a form of money that is free. And that's a radical concept. When I tell people that, oh, yeah, but it's working for me. I've got a house and a car and my kids are at good schools and whatever. It's all working for most people. Why are you trying to change that? Look at the world. 8 billion people, probably more than half of them, it's not working for them. They're in debt peonage. So yes, there's a danger that I and others like me get labeled as lunatics. But yeah, I also believe that that's a badge of honor. I don't do it for that reason.
No, of course, yeah.
I also think I need to work with the establishment. I'm not very good at that, I have to be honest. I'm not a politician.
Understatement of the year, though. That's hilarious.
I try.
Yeah.
I really do. And I don't like to upset people. I actually don't like it. But conflict does work for me. I'm happy in conflict.
Sure.
I have no problem with that. And as I say, I don't want to be their enemy. But there are times when they leave me no choice. And I have to do what I believe is right.
And by they here, who are you talking about specifically?
I'm talking about, if we're going to label villains here, I think banks are villains, for sure. I think many in government, some in government are possibly trying to do the right thing. But I find it hard to believe that government and banks are not in cahoots. I believe they are. And they support the status quo, and they support fiat money, and they support money printing, and we give them euphemistic terms like quantitative easing, just to disguise the alchemy of what's actually going on, the magic trick that's being performed on the people at large. And I think it's essential to... I had this discussion very recently, actually, with a group of Islamic FinTech companies. We sat around a table, and the argument was that we need to work with the banks and we need to work with government so that our fintechs can be represented at the table, and that we can... And it got a little bit heated. I probably got a little bit emotional at some point. And I said, fundamentally, these people don't believe in what we believe. And they don't believe in sound money, and they don't believe in leveling up. And they work for their bonuses and their personal careers and not for the good of society. And we around this table have a aligned ideological vision. We want to see good in society. We want to see us level up. We want to see us become successful, not just as entrepreneurs, but as doctors and nurses and engineers and lawyers and every aspect of society. We want to be successful. We are a demonized, marginalized community, especially in the UK. And there is much that we can do to level up. And it starts with becoming economically successful. And we're not economically successful when we are in hock to the banks. And the types of okay, I'm going to use the word Islamic finance, and I'm going to use it very broadly, but I know that you have a problem with that term, and actually I have a problem with that term as well. But let's use it broadly to start with.
Sure.
Islamic finance should not be what it is today. It's based on the fiat fractional reserve banking system, which Tariq will have spoken about in great detail. And therefore, I can't support what it does today, the industry which is dominated by Islamic banks, which essentially are reverse engineering, replicating what conventional banks do, but with halal structures on top of it. And whilst I have no problem with the scholars who sign off on those halal contracts, because they are halal, I'm not going to debate that, the fundamental basis on which banking operates is rotten, because it's money creation. And as I've said earlier, money creation is riba. So that's why I don't believe in it. And I believe there are alternative systems, there are alternative financial entities, non-bank financial intermediaries, who can solve specific financial problems, not just for Muslims, but for everybody. So let's not call it Islamic finance. Let's call it something else. I don't know what to call it. I don't even like the term ethical finance because I'm not even sure what that means. But whatever it is, let's start from the premise that the economy is not working. For most people, even though we might think that we are comfortable right now, our children will not be. They already can't find jobs. My children are graduating from university. One already has. It's brutal out there. There are no jobs. We caused this post-1971. This is the culmination of fiat money. Believe me, this is what happens when you allow money to run away and there's no jobs left, right? We can't afford to hire people. Yesterday, the unemployment figure for the UK was 5%, lowest it's been since COVID. That's nuts. It's crazy. How did we get here? Fiat money is how we got here, believe me. So we can do something about this. I don't know what to label it. I agree with you.
Just on that, actually. Yeah. So I was thinking about this. When it comes to Bitcoin, one of the things you say about Bitcoin, the adjective, like what's the right adjective here? And one of the adjectives that you've already used in this conversation a few times is sound. Sound money. And it was interesting, when in my conversations with Mohammed Yeselhaq and Ismail as well, we came up with this thing of sound hearts, sound money. With finance, sound finance, essentially. I don't know, there's something about that, because obviously with the sound hearts is quite powerful, because obviously there's a Quranic phrase about the qalb salim, right? There's something to do with the wholesome. It comes from the root that actually links to Islam, devotion, submission, as well as salam, peace, security, safety. It kind of has almost linguistically, etymologically, all of the meanings that actually you're trying to represent, right? In terms of the sound money. I mean, other alternatives were sort of like, conscious, right? Conscious finance, conscious whatever. But yeah, I definitely agree with you. And I think just on this issue of, and it's a major kind of theme of mine, which gets me into trouble sometimes. But I really have major reservations around, the way in which Muslim and Islamic is used as an adjective. Yeah. In ways when it has been done in such a way that actually it's just ceased to have any meaning anymore, right? In a way, right? It's almost like another great example of this is when we talk about Muslim countries. So it becomes like a socio-political or an identity political label. But then if you ask, well, so what do you think about so-called Muslim countries and what they're up to and what they're not up to when they should be doing certain things? So it just loses all meaning. And the same thing with Islamic finance. And then the other problem is with the products and service side is this very insular concern, which is completely non-prophetic. It's a major, one thing I've tried to sort of raise awareness around for a long time now is just can we just stop just developing products and services for a particular faith group as if the same concerns of those people are not shared by all other humans? And actually, if you're really interested in the thing faith flourishing and the value and the value of the faith proposition being known, then the exact thing to do is essentially exactly the prophetic model. And when I say prophetic, I mean all prophets. I don't just mean one, where we say they were sent for all people or a mercy for all people. So maybe you can speak about that, because I think it feels as though you yourself have gone on a bit of evolution in regards to this, and you're speaking in much more universal terms about this yourself.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about people having the same concerns. All humans have the same concerns, really. And the prophetic example is to speak to all humans, not just to one small group of people.
And importantly, the same right to God, I suppose.
Yes, that's right. And I rather feel that we've ended up focusing on this industry called Islamic finance, which caters to one particular very Sharia conservative group of people, and that's the people that we need to be putting these products to, and we use Arabic terms, and it's not inviting everybody. So we see that in politics as well. Look at the protesters in London who protested against the atrocities in Gaza. They were all over Europe, in Spain, for example. These are non-brown, non-Muslim people protesting in favor of human rights, not Muslim rights, not Palestinian rights, not some specific small group, but the fact that an atrocity is taking place and we have the power to stop it, but we're not doing it, right? This is a universal message, shouldn't just be to Muslims. And our greatest allies here have been non-Muslims, right? For our own people, our own brothers and sisters. So, this should tell us a lot. And I rather think that when we start with the message that the economy is broken, here's a way that we can fix some injustices and fix inequality. And here are some specific ways we can drill down into that. How do you save the NHS? How do you build infrastructure? How do you level up entrepreneurs? How do you encourage innovation? These are all things that requires a working economy and finance to be sound. You can call it sound finance. And now you've had sound money. Let's talk about sound finance. And over the years, yes, Islamic finance became my technical expertise. And I came up with some very arcane, complex structures. We keep using the word structure. We don't even know what the word means. I was basically a financial engineer. My job was to create these very fancy financial instruments to replicate the return of anything in the conventional space. And in the early days, we were very idealistic. We're going back 25 years now. And we tried to create products that genuinely aligned with our faith principles. They were risk sharing, meaning we share profits and losses of a particular underlying trade, rather than interest, come hell or high water, whatever happens. It's what I call the Goodfellas MBA, which is, your house burnt down, F you, pay me. Your wife got ill, F you, pay me. I don't care. I'm the banker, the bankster, and I need my money back with interest. So that's how fiat finance works. But how sound finance works is I'm no longer a banker. I'm an investor in you and your venture. And I'm encouraged, I'm incentivized to do true due diligence on your venture. I spend months with you, with your management team, with your financial accounts, looking at your operations, understanding how you work. What's your internal governance? How can I make sure there's no negligence or fraud or incompetence? Or how do you lock in your contracts with your suppliers and your customers? And I want to see all of this stuff. And then when I'm happy, I'll say, okay, I will invest some money with you. And we're going to agree to split the profits or losses. So I'm going to take a risk on the performance of you as a manager and as your business. Now I'm incentivized to make sure I choose good managers. These are the dartboards where I'm trying to hit the bullseye each time, not 20, and hoping one of them sticks. So here I'm saying, okay, now I'm agreeing to take risk with you. So A, it's real economy. There's a real trade taking place. You're building something real. You're creating real jobs. I'm not shuffling paper around here. And B, it's risk sharing. So you and I are partners. It's no longer an asymmetric relationship where I'm the lender and you're the borrower, and I'm the master and you're the slave, and I'm the global north and you're the global south. No, we're partners now. Now it's a much healthier relationship. We work together to make sure we're both successful. Right?
And this is what you're doing now.
This is what I do for a living. That's
firm,
my fiat finance role.
Cordoba Capital Markets.
Yeah. So my job is to find good companies with my co-founder, and we identify these and we select good companies with good underlying solvent assets doing good business, whether it's products or services that they manufacture. And we finance that with a form of working capital or trade finance, except that it's not, I'm going to give you 100. I don't really care what happens in between. Give me 110 back next year. No, it's, I'm going to give you 100, and then we're going to look at your cash flows and agree to split them on a particular basis.
How unique is your current product relative to not necessarily the sort of the things that are existing within the so-called Islamic finance space, but just generally out there? Are are significant aspects of your current model actually not too dissimilar from what is already out there, or is it really quite standout different?
So it is really quite standout different, but I mean, there are models in North America, I think particularly in Canada, which are called income financing and royalty financing. So in theory, a financier will come along and say, I will finance your business and I'll take a top slice of your revenue, say 5 or 10% or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And that's not dissimilar in some ways. But we have a more holistic view of this form of financing. We obviously do it from in a if you like, a God-centric way. We think about what is a form of finance that goes back to the prophetic roots of trade. So I'm considering Prophet ﷺ as the first mudarib in this sense. He's not literally the first mudarib, but he was a mudarib. He was a manager.
Yeah, just clarify what
mudarib is. A manager of people's capital. And he entered into this transaction called a mudaraba. That's the first form of Islamic financing. Yeah. A mudaraba is an investment management agreement, a partnership between you and me. And his investors are called Rab al-Mal, the lord of the wealth, the owner of the capital, right? So the owner of capital puts money into business, and he as the mudarib will take this capital and he'll go outside the city walls and he'll trade whatever goods, textiles, spices, etc., bring them back, and he'll endure the hardships and the risks of that trade. Banditry, bad weather, whatever other reasons, calamities might befall him. Those are the risks that he has to assess and navigate. He brings back his goods into the city walls, trades them in the marketplace. If he's astute and competent, he makes a profit, and he shares that profit under a pre-agreed ratio with his Rab al-Mal, the investor. And this is a very simple relationship. This is a partnership where the investors are doing due diligence on this manager, saying, is he trustworthy? Is he al-Amin? Can I make sure he'll look after my interests as a partner, and send him on his way? And therefore, they're doing their due diligence on him as a mudarib. This is a beautiful relationship. This is a relationship where both parties are incentivized to succeed. It's not asymmetric. One has power over the other. And what I wanted to do was take this prophetic concept, the very first form of Islamic finance, and replicate it in a sophisticated, modern capital markets instrument that's listed on a stock exchange and regulated in an international financial center, and which international investors come in and put their money with this vehicle. And we identify specific trades and say, okay, here's a trade in one agricultural commodity or some goods and services or some professional services. Which of these trades do you like? Which one do you want to invest in? These are the returns that we're targeting. We don't guarantee anything, but we can't guarantee anything. That would be haram.
Where are you right now in your stage of evolution? So can retail investors get involved?
Unfortunately, retail investors can't, except through feeder funds.
Okay.
So there are funds out there who partner with us, who invest into us. And they have nominee accounts. So they allow retail investors to come to them and invest smaller amounts. But because our regulator says you can only face professional investors, qualified investors, institutional investors, that's what our regulatory permissions allow us to do. I would love to be able to have everybody come in. But today I can't do that because it's like being a private equity firm or a private credit firm.
What would it take for that to change? Can that change in the future?
Yes, it can change. We are actively looking into technology that can allow us to, if you like, democratize the product that we offer. I think in future, there's a possibility that, and this is something I looked into 3 years ago when we started this, that will allow us to tokenize our offering.
Right.
So that instead of having individuals who have a minimum of $100,000 to invest, we'll be able to allow people with $1 to invest because they can just buy simply a token on a digital exchange. And that will give them the rights to units in the mudaraba, in the investment management agreement, which is a specific trade, which is backed by some beneficial interest in something.
Is the tokenization process complex, generally speaking, or is it actually relatively...
It's not, from a technology point of view, it's not complex. I think from a trust point of view, from a regulatory point of view, it's a bit of an issue right now. So when I started this process 3 years ago, I was very reluctant to go with the digital asset providers, the exchanges, because the level of professionalism was not where I wanted it to be. And the approach that I took was, we need to be better than the blue chips. Not even at their level, we need to be better in terms of quality, right? So if you went to a Goldman Sachs or a Deutsche Bank or a JP Morgan and you looked at one of their bond prospectuses and opened it up, it's a very fancy legal document, 300 pages thick, put together by very, very expensive lawyers in the city. You would look at it, and if you're a professional investor, you say, oh, yes, this is very good. Yes, it's all been done properly. I understand this. My team of lawyers will go through this, and my compliance people will go through this, and my traders will go through this, and we'll all get satisfied. I wanted that level of quality control in my business. I did not want to be, I want to be careful how I say this. We have a tendency in Muslim business circles to be amateurs. That's why I think we get scammed as a community quite a lot. We have a tendency to fall for these scams. A lot of crypto stuff going on. Like I say, Bitcoin, not crypto. They're very, very different things. And I think as a community, we need to move away from that. We need to be better than the best in this community, which is why I think there's a strong argument to say, learn your skills in the belly of the beast. Now, people misinterpret this. They say, this guy Harris, he says riba is haram, and the next thing he says is go and be a banker and earn your money from riba. No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying learn from blue chip institutions, whether that's law firms, whether that's accounting, big four firms, whether that's McKinsey, the big management consultancy firms, whether that's, whatever it is, learn your skills, whether it's marketing, whether it's tech, whether it's finance, learn those skills in the best firms, get your training, but have your eyes on the prize. Know when is the right moment for you to leave and either set up on your own or work with one of the more established players. The new wave of Islamic fintech firms, again, I'm using that word Islamic very loosely,
Sure. Yeah.
Who are genuinely doing something good and useful and healthy. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I want us to be. I want in 5 or 10 years' time for people, if they hear this word Islamic finance or ethical finance or alternative finance, I want them to think about CCM and say, oh yeah, they're the sort of Goldman Sachs of the industry, aren't they? But in a good way, not the culture and values of Goldman Sachs, but the quality control and the capability of Goldman Sachs. That's where I want us to be.
Sure. Well, I hope that manifests.
Sure.
We've got 5 minutes or so. I thought it might be just nice to end with maybe some, like more personal mindset or motivation type questions. You strike me as somebody who has a lot of courage, the courage to change your mind. And I find that actually a lot of people don't have that courage to change their mind. It's very difficult, for people to change their mind or to say, actually, the way I was seeing something before, maybe that wasn't quite right. What are your personal reflections on? Is that something just been natural to you? Has that been difficult for you over time?
Very difficult.
Tell us about that then.
Yeah, I'm going to reveal lots of vulnerabilities now. I'm a closed-minded person by nature. Alhamdulillah, I was born into Islam. I was born into a Muslim family. Would I have ever come to it of my own volition? One doesn't think about what might have been, but alhamdulillah, I was born into a Muslim family. And it was a huge U-turn for me to realize that the industry that I was working in for at least a couple of decades was deeply flawed, and I was merely contributing to that flaw, and that I had to leave it in 2017, which is around the time that I had this conversation with the guy in the audience in the Q&A session who said, what do you think of Bitcoin? And I don't know what else to say. It's actually been very good for me, because just by accepting that there could be something different out there, and I'm eternally grateful to the individual who actually asked me that question, just by accepting that there might be something fundamentally, radically different out there that changes my whole worldview of finance and the monetary system, means that I end up questioning everything. And I now start to look at things like, even though if I fundamentally disagree with somebody, I start to think in terms of, might he have a point somewhere? We can say this about supporters of the far right in this country, for example. There would have been a time, and I got chased by skinheads in the 70s and 80s, and we got punched and kicked and slapped and spat at, and we experienced real racism in those days. It wasn't microaggressions; it was real aggressions in those days, and that was my training in the far right. And so you would think I have a visceral response to that today. But I think it's helpful to be able to step back and say, what are they actually experiencing right now? Why are they gravitating towards these organizations? Because the world is not working for them. It forgot them, right? And it forgot them. And we as Muslims should be the first people reaching out to them and saying, you know, your problems are our problems. And we could fix them together. There are forms of finance and monetary systems and economics and ways of working together, mu'amalat, relationships between people that are beneficial to both of us and are common to both of us. So let's fix it. I view people like Tariq al-Dawani as a character study. It's very helpful I'm so grateful that he's my friend, because everybody should have a friend like him, because you can learn about character from him. He never speaks down to anybody. He's always respectful and polite. He always engages on an equal level. He never dismisses a question. You know, they say there's no such thing as a stupid question. Well, there are things as stupid questions, right? Yeah. But he never lets I
apologize for the one.
He never lets people know this. And mashallah, that's such a prophetic trait.
Yes.
And it's good to have a living example in front of me, because sometimes we can sort of, yes, Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he lived 1400 years ago and I can't really relate because he lived then and I live now. But then you see a guy like Tariq, and mashallah, Allah bless him, you know, his manner is beautiful, his akhlaq and his adab. And that's very helpful for me, who was, you know, previously a very closed-minded person. It helps me to open up. And I'm still am, by the way. I'm surprised that you said that about me, because I don't think of myself as open-minded. I find it hard to change my mind. And when I explain Bitcoin to my conservative Muslim friends, and they tell me, oh, but it's just this and this and this, and they're closed-minded about it, and I think, oh, that's how I used to think. And then somehow someone convinced me to open my mind a little bit. And they just opened the door a crack, and that allowed me to think about other things in more open ways as well. So, you know, in that sense, it's been very, but even if Bitcoin doesn't become the global reserve currency or a medium of exchange, actually in many ways, it helped me as a human being.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, no, very powerful. Okay. And finally, maybe just to bring it to a close, let's accelerate to the last day. God says, Harris.
Honestly, I've got shivers now.
Harris, leaving aside all the details of what you did or didn't do, what were you actually trying to do?
I don't know. Just have more in my credit than in my debit. That's it. I just fear that's the wrong way. I can't say anything else.
Well, I'm sure that there is more in the credit than the debit.
Inshallah.
I hope that your efforts are accepted and blessed, and you're still looking fit and young. God bless you. So yeah, good few decades left to change the world, Mr. Irfan. I'll encourage people to follow your work, read your bits. I'll link in the various things. Thank you for your clarity, courage, the communication, and there's still part of me that's going to say, you know, you're the William Wallace of the financial world that we need. So I expect next time to see the war paint and everything, and a horse maybe as well, just to take it back to the good old days.
Sounds great. I'll do that next time.
All right. Until next time, Harris. Thank you so much.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you.